So it's kind of cool. First of all, good morning. I just was struck by this, that it occurred to me while I was just now proclaiming the gospel. I was like, this was the gospel that I had on the back of my ordination card the day when I was ordained. You make little like trading cards for when you're ordained, and a verse from this gospel is on the back of mine. Anyway, I want to reflect, though, this morning on something we hear from the first reading. Our first reading gives us the opportunity this morning to reflect on everyone's favorite biblical theme. Of course, I'm talking about circumcision, okay? Why not talk about circumcision 8:15 in the morning on my anniversary? So, here's the deal. If we don't grasp this biblical theme, we're going to miss a major piece. This is not some small little incidental aspect of salvation history. This is a major, major significant reality, right? So, circumcision was let's be honest, it was the very odd sign that God gave Abraham as the sign of the covenant, right? Every male child on the 8th day was to be circumcised as a sign of the covenant. He could have asked Abraham and his people, his tribe, to do any number of things. Like, you have to wear this particular turban, Abraham, you and your friends, you and your sons. Or you all have to get this particular tattoo so everyone knows that you're part of my covenant people. But no, that's not what God asked them to do, right? So to generalize, of course, we all know, but what is circumcision? It's the removal, the cutting away, the removal of the physical covering of that which is most sensitive of the male body. It's a good PG definition right there, keeping things above board. Yeah, it's the removal of the covering of that which is most hidden, most private, most sensitive, most tender, all of those things, right? So for the Jews, this rite was performed on newborns, right? On babies who are 8 days old. So back to this first reading from the Acts of the Apostles. You have some Jewish converts to Christianity who are insisting that you cannot be saved unless you are fully observing the rites and rituals of the Mosaic covenant, unless you are fully observing the signs of the Jewish people, namely circumcision. You cannot be saved unless you are circumcised. So what do you got going on? You've got all of these adult Gentile men who are converting, Greeks who are converting, people from Cyprus and Phoenicia who are converting. So they're being catechized, they're being formed, right? Okay, think of first century AD RCIA classes, right? Okay, so gentlemen, you have come such a long way. You are really progressing in your journey of discipleship. They're all going, yeah, we really like being Christians. We can't wait until we're full-fledged baptized Christians. You're really coming a long way in your faith, accepting Jesus Christ. You're really almost on the way of becoming disciples. Now, there's just one more thing we have to let you know before you're fully initiated. And they're like, what's that? And they look like, Peter, why is he sharpening that knife, About that, yeah. You can see why, as Luke says in the Acts of the Apostles, you can see why he says, there arose no little dissension and debate over this, I think so. So Paul and Barnabas, they were vehemently opposed to it, right? Paul, who was a Pharisee, right? He was a convert of Judaism. He was the Pharisee of Pharisees, an observer of the laws, all of those things. He was a devout observer and defender of the Mosaic law until he had his encounter with Christ on the road to Damascus. And what he had seen, what Paul and Barnabas had seen, they had seen the way that the Spirit was moving, how the Spirit was moving, all of those things. And so he was discerning that the physical sign of circumcision was no longer necessary. By the way, it was also Paul who in his letters he says to the Philippians, he says, we are the circumcision. I've often thought that would be a hilarious t-shirt design, right? We are the circumcision, St. Paul. Maybe you don't think so. Anyway, don't steal my idea. I think it's going to really take off. Anyway, he says we are the circumcision. But then you go I thought Paul was against circumcision. No. He's saying the physical necessity, I'm against that, but the deeper spiritual reality, Paul saw that it was pointing to a deeper spiritual reality. He saw that it was pointing to a deeper spiritual reality, because also in the Old Testament you hear the prophets saying, circumcise your hearts. That's what Paul was discerning. He was seeing this connection, the circumcision of the heart. How do you do that? What St. Paul came to see is that the circumcision of the heart is the necessary precondition of being saved. To be saved is to experience the profound love of Christ as he did on the road to Damascus, on his mission to go kill and persecute Christians, right? This is where the gospel intersects with this first reading. How do we remain in Jesus? How do we abide in his love? Well, we remain in him, we abide in him by continually uncovering our hearts, sharing our hearts, showing him our hearts, revealing to the Lord that which is most intimate, hidden, private, sensitive, tender, like those places that we want to cover over and keep shielded and protected. Like, no, circumcise your hearts, reveal your hearts, to stay in that posture of spiritual nakedness before the love of Christ. That's to experience the deep communion with his mercy. Remain in me, abide in me. And in so doing this is how we bear fruit into the world. A transformed heart transforms hearts. That's the idea. Circumcise your hearts. Let them be unveiled, uncovered, unprotected. Only in that way do you experience his mercy. Amen.